When creating your financial plan and investment strategy, you need to remember that what got you to that point may not be the best move forward. Just because it worked in the past doesn't mean your strategy will continue to work. Consider your changing needs, the shift in market conditions, and how your world has evolved, among many other factors. I am a big believer in thinking bigger and embracing a growth mindset. This requires rethinking old patterns and ways of doing things. When it comes to your finances, take the time to consider new ideas and be open to change. What got you here won't get you there. And with that being read, I want to welcome you back to the 127 Fit podcast. Today's guest is a certified financial planner, husband, father, podcaster, writer, and athlete. Today's guest is Taylor Leary. Taylor, I want to welcome you to the 127 Fit podcast.
Quentin, thanks for having me on. Very excited for today.
Absolutely, man. Taylor, I appreciate your time today. It is Mother's Day, so again, just really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule and then also your family's schedule. So with that being said, Taylor, let's jump into the warm-up. And the first question that I have for you is, how do you start your day? And is there some sort of morning routine that you like to stick to most mornings?
Yeah, great start off. So it's kind of interesting. Over the last probably 8 months, I've realized that morning routines are extremely powerful. When my daughter was first born, I didn't have much of a morning routine. And I realized and recognized that she was waking me up by when she got up. And it started my day off kind of like already behind the 8 ball. And so within the last 8 months, my daughter, just for kind of context, she's about 20 months old now.
Okay.
And so I realized that I've got to change something. So about 8 months ago, I decided that this is it. I'm getting up at 5:30 in the morning. And what I realized is that she gets up about between 6:30 and 7. All right. So with that, I was like, all right, now I can have some time to myself. I can have some time to get my day started. So I wake up about 5:30 in the morning, and then immediately jump into a 10-minute meditation.
Cool.
So I was introduced to meditation about a year ago, and started to slowly get into it. Didn't really understand what meditation was all about and like what you were supposed to get out of it. But then I did this 21-day challenge where every morning I did a 10-minute meditation. And it hit me like just a sack of rocks.
Right.
Where it was like, whoa, holy crap! It just starts my day out in a much more mellow way, and almost kind of ease into your own mind. Because I think like a lot of your guests that you've had on, there's a lot going on in my brain, and to catch up to it and to get it started, it's kind of like priming the pump, getting the engine going. And then from there, just having my cup of coffee, I do try to write down. What I call memoirs, or write down some stuff in my journal, and then just chat with my wife a little bit, and hop in the shower. I try to be at least ready to go when my daughter wakes up.
Perfect.
Because when she wakes up, she's a lot like myself, and so it's just the tornado starts, and she's onto it, and all of a sudden the day just evolves around her, and then drop my daughter off at 7:30 with the nanny. And then on to work.
Cool. Now, I got a question about the meditation. Do you use like a specific app, or is it just something kind of on your own that you do?
So I bounced around a little bit and tried to do the no audio, and that really I couldn't get into my own head.
Right.
So there was Insight. What is it? Insight Timer.
Okay.
It's a free app out there, and it's amazing because they have a world of meditations, and these are like either music or they're guided meditations where somebody's quite literally talking to you. There's different mantras and different things that you can go through, so it gives me a really good platform. I've looked at some of the other like paid for stuff, and frankly I haven't really been that impressed by it. So the Insight Timer has been a great app for me.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so Taylor, is there a favorite book that you like to gift often?
Yes, one of my favorite books all time, and this goes back to high school, which I think I was very fortunate with my education, is The Power of One by Bryce Courtney. just been an extremely powerful book to go back, and it's one of those books. I don't re-watch movies, and I don't reread a lot of books.
Yeah, me neither.
And this is one of those books that I've reread.
Cool.
And every time I get something new out of it.
Now, what's the? I think I might have a. I mean, I understand a little bit of where it's coming from, but like just for the listener out there, what is kind of the overall gist of the book, and why has it been a book that you continue to go back to from when you first read it in high school?
Yeah. So it's about this. It's a story of this young boy in apartheid South Africa, and he is part of kind of the the group of people that is suppressing a group of people, but
right.
then he becomes the minority.
Okay.
And it's just very fascinating with the things and challenges that he has to overcome. And it goes through World War II, where some things happen there, and there's just it's just that he's faced with so many challenges at every corner, and it's that what happened, he has to pick up these little lessons along the way. And it's those little lessons that I go back to.
Right, okay.
That in the power of one being that you're kind of responsible for who you
Absolutely.
are and the stuff that happens in your life.
Yep.
And if you don't take responsibility for that, then you become a victim. Right. And he constantly is overcoming this victim mentality where he had every opportunity to just lay down and kind of just get sucked up and kind of become a bad person,
right.
or just take a negative view on the world, and he just doesn't. And at the end, he has he overcomes this other guy that's his adversary, and it's just a beautiful story.
Cool. All right, very good. So, do you have a favorite quote or mantra that has played a big positive impact in your life?
So it was funny you asked that, and we were talking about it a little bit before we
right.
jumped online here. And every day I have different alarms that go off throughout the day. And they're alarms just to kind of remind myself of, kind of staying on track.
Yep.
So, at 8 o'clock there's an alarm, at noon there's an alarm, at 3:30 in the afternoon there's an alarm. So at noon every day I have my alarm goes off and it reads on my screen of my phone, "Winning is a state of mind that embraces everything you do." And I've had this as something on my phone for like 3 or 4 years now. And
Mm-hmm.
I've never gotten rid of it. And I kind of forgot where it came from. And so in preparation for this, I went back and I just Google searched it. And shockingly enough, it came from The Power of One.
Go, man, right?
So it's like, all right, well, at least I'm living some of the authentic life. That my favorite book and my favorite quote are kind of tied together.
For sure. Awesome. So I know that you also in the introduction I mentioned that you're a podcaster. You have your own podcast, and I believe the name of it is, correct me if I'm wrong, The Eagle's Nest?
Yes. So our firm, Presidential Wealth Management, my firm here, we started a podcast called The Eagle's Nest.
Cool.
And we do it a weekly podcast, and it's with myself and other colleagues in the office. And we're talking about various things in the financial world.
Right.
So it's really fun to collaborate with the other advisors, because the beautiful thing about this business is there's so many ways to look at your finances and have financial plans and different thoughts, ideas, strategies,
right.
etc.
Right. Now, along with your own podcast, is there a podcast or podcast that you find great value in, or that you would recommend to the listener out there?
Yes, I'm a big believer. I love How I Built This.
Yep.
And then also Corner Office podcast.
Okay.
So definitely very business centric. I think I find myself in what's interesting about The Power of One is that it's a novel and not a business book. I'm the believer and the consumer of business books,
yep.
personal development,
Absolutely.
personal self-help, if you will.
Me too.
So How I Built This has been a pretty cool book for me. I really do believe that I have an entrepreneurial spirit.
Absolutely.
And definitely entrepreneurial if you think about it in the context of my business here at Presidential.
Yep. I know How I Built This. I believe that's on NPR.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's you're not the first guest that's mentioned it. I know Jen, the owner of Just Be Kitchen, a restaurant here in Denver, she mentioned that being one of her favorites, and I think there was a couple other guests that brought that up, and I've listened to it, and it's just kind of people just sharing their story about how they kind of got to where they're at in regards to entrepreneurship. So
what's always funny about that is that it's such an indirect route to most
mm-hmm.
of these, like the way that these people build
absolutely.
these businesses. And
absolutely.
And that, to get to point A to point B, everybody wants to go in this straight line. And they have this vision, and what I've kind of given myself to is the fact that like it's where I want to go in the future or where I want to be. I've got to kind of be open to whatever got
Absolutely.
So that quote that you started with, what got you here won't get you there, is very much in line with my beliefs on kind of building businesses, and then with how I built this podcast. I mean, it's unbelievable how it's just a zigzag.
Right,
and
absolutely.
all of a sudden, maybe a lucky thing happens. They get kind of a lucky bounce, or maybe an unlucky thing happens, and they have this vision of what they want to change. It's beautiful.
Right. Yeah, and I saw when I was scrolling through your Instagram, you had a quote on there about a quote or a kind of a little writing that you had talked about luck and how it's like, hey, preparation creates luck. And I'm a big proponent. Kind of a quote that is continually playing in my head that I really try to meditate on is preparation creates opportunity. Kind of the same thing. It's
exactly.
like, hey, if you're taking care of your business today, right where you're at, that luck, that opportunity, those open doors, whatever words you want to throw out there, they're gonna come. They're going to present themselves, but it's all about us and whatever dreams and ambitions and goals and visions, whatever we have. It's like we can have all that, but it's like you're not going to get there if you're not taking care of right now, right here, like today. You know what I mean? And then all that other stuff, like you're saying, it's like, dude, like all these people just show up in your life, they leave your life and things. It's just like, dude, just have eyes open, ears open, heart open. Prepare today, and things will come to fruition. They will. They will. I've seen it in my own life. I'm sure you've seen it in your life.
Yeah, and that's so funny because you just have to acknowledge and kind of you mentioned kind of walk into a setting with your eyes, heart, mind, whatever. And I always say, walk into it with your eyes wide open.
Absolutely,
because you just never know what opportunity might fit into whatever you're trying to do.
Absolutely.
And the introduction that you get to a person or what have you, it's pretty powerful. Like, what you were just talking about reminds me of another quote that I really like. We're going to go into...
No, it's good. I'm a quote junkie, man. They're powerful, man, because they usually come from powerful people.
Yeah, it's something of a variation. I think Gary Vaynerchuk brought it to my attention, and I think a lot of the listeners probably know who he is.
Gary V, man.
Yeah, Gary V. And it was basically macro patience, micro speed.
Absolutely.
And the beauty of that, to me, is that hit me with a ton of bricks because it was like, man, you're exactly right. I get super impatient about kind of the big picture.
Right.
And to hear that from somebody like him and to hear about some of these, other really, famous and successful entrepreneurs, it's like they all kind of had this vision and this energy and they wanted to just drive. But sometimes you've got to make those decisions on a daily basis, but have patience for what that bigger vision looks like.
Yes.
Because if you jump over those hurdles and you cut corners, then all of a sudden something's going to fall through the cracks. And now that's where the foundation starts to crumble.
There you go, man. We're already on fire, and we just got through the warm ups. That's good, man. We're definitely warmed up. This is good. So, all right, Taylor, let's jump into, if you don't mind sharing a little bit of like your backstory, if you don't mind sharing like where you grew up, kind of like what childhood was, and then we'll just kind of transition into kind of high school and college, and if you were involved in athletic sports, kind of what that meant to you. Let's just start unpacking that backstory a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you have ever met me, one of the first things that you will find out very quickly is that I was born and raised in Steamboat Springs, Colorado.
Cool. You're a native, man.
I'm a native Coloradan. Native. So for those that aren't familiar with Steamboat, small mountain town in northwest Colorado, and it's one of the most beautiful places to have been from. I haven't been to everywhere in the world, but I know that it's a very special place.
Right.
And just for in some ways dumb luck, because my parents just had this vision of raising their children, raising their family in Steamboat. So they, 40 years ago moved to Steamboat, and they moved there with no money, nothing. My mom was a banker here in Denver, and my dad was working construction, and so they moved up to Steamboat with not a whole heck of a lot to write to their name, and my mom got a job with the bank up there.
Cool.
And my dad was pouring concrete and busting his tail, working his ass off, and then things just came together for him. And I think it's because of sheer work, hard work, determination, really, put my sister and I on a very, very good track.
Awesome.
And we were very involved. One of the reasons that they moved to Steamboat is that they were going to the mountains to go skiing anyway.
Yep.
And so they're like, why are we just... And this was back in the 70s, so getting up there wasn't quite the same story as it is today.
Yeah.
And so they're like, you know what, screw this. We're just going to go. They honeymooned in Steamboat, so they're like, Steamboat seems like a pretty cool place to live. And so that's where they landed there, and it's just been an amazing story. They're still up there, so I get to go and hang out with them up
awesome.
there.
Yeah.
And I look at it, and this is kind of on the heels of what happened last week in the Denver schools here, and it's obviously scary, and I don't want to use it as a platform to talk about anything else other than the fact that, like, being a kid in the United States, or at least in some cases, is pretty freaking scary.
Yeah.
And I feel like Steamboat's such a fortunate place because we got to experience this world that was, like, quite literally defined by the valley. Like, there's a mountain here, and we had to stay in that thing. And so, like, we had all the same friends. And so you just, like, whether you liked them or not, those are your buddies.
Right.
And so you did all of your sports with them. They were on your ski team, they were on your soccer team, they were on your hockey team, they were on your baseball team, and it was the same 12 to 20 kids all that you just hung out with at all times that were just involved with sports. So for me, sports were massive growing up. I was a soccer player, but my true deep passion was hockey.
Cool.
And I started playing hockey probably, I think I was, my dad first put me on skates when I was like 5. Up there in Steamboat, and it was we had a crappy little program up there, open air ice arena. I mean, I remember many games where we were shoveling 8-10 inches of snow off the ice to even play the games, and having to stop at the intermissions and have the parents get out there with their shovels. So just a really cool experience. And then I saw that program develop in a big way. We roofed the rink as the deal was called, and it was just an amazing place to grow up. I've seen a lot of change in Steamboat. I've seen a lot of positive change, and it's then there's a ski mountain there.
Yeah.
And so skiing was just like by my very nature a part of my life. So now I'm massive into skiing. Not so much into hockey. That dream sort of died. I had dreams of going to the NHL.
Of course, when we all had dreams of NFL, professional sports, but that's the beautiful part of childhood, man, having those dreams.
Right.
And, you know.
Yeah, so my sister and I were 4 years apart. So it was just interesting because we never had a lot of things in common. She was in ballet, she was into dance and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I was into hockey and my team sports, and then she went off to college, and I was just doing this and that. And so I ended up playing AAA hockey, which was a fairly high level. I mean, that's a high level hockey.
Yeah,
and I mean, that's the next step there is either juniors or college. And it really kind of, made me realize that I'm a good hockey player, or I was a good hockey player, but I wasn't that good.
Right.
And my dream of going to the NHL probably died on that moment. But hey, I had a great run at it.
For sure. Now, I mean, just you sharing a little bit about your upbringing with your mom and your dad, your sister in Steamboat Springs. It sounds pretty idyllic to me. Like, you really had a solid foundation of a family life. I mean, that's fair to say, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how did that, like, in your younger years, elementary and high school, how did that kind of set you up, and how did that really play out as you grew up, as you got into high school? Did you kind of, because I know for me, I grew up in a very disciplined, very solid, great family, things of that nature. But then towards the end of high school, I really kind of, and then the early part of college, I kind of took a opposite direction and started partying and all that. Was there any of that in your life, if you don't mind sharing, or did you kind of just stay on that straight and narrow for the most part?
I had a wonderful childhood.
Right.
My parents were hardworking. My dad ended up opening a business, or he was a partner in a business, real estate appraisal. And my mom was, at the executive level of the bank there in Steamboat. And they were very hardworking professionals.
Right.
And so that gave my sister and I a lot of time alone, if you will. Where my mom was leaving for work at 5:30 in the morning. My dad would get us up and out to school, and I'd ride my bike to school, and that was the beauty. Because my bike was my freedom.
And
I, to this day, mountain biking is my deep passion.
Love it, man.
And I love endurance athletics. I run and this and that. But my bike was my vehicle to freedom. And it was amazing. But when I got to be 16, I think I got a little too cool for myself. And now I got a car. I got this, crappy, what was it, a Ford Explorer.
There you go.
And we called it the Exploder. I mean, every time you turned that darn thing on, it was like, I don't know if this thing's going to start.
That's awesome.
So it was funny. But I grew up my dad was in the military.
Okay.
He was in Vietnam. My mom had a solid background. They did have great like ground rules,
right?
But they gave us a lot of flexibility.
Okay.
And so I didn't have like this really hardcore like kind of militaristic. Although my dad would whistle reveille every single morning, so that was a little shocking to me. And it wasn't the greatest way to wake up, but I might share a similar experience as you. When I got to like high school and then college, I definitely I knew how to party and knew how to have fun and did that in a big way, and I feel like one of the biggest things is going back to like the sports element, and that really has gotten me more back into really my true identity.
Absolutely.
And kind of pushed away the party side of things. And definitely still part of me is going having fun and having some beers and whatnot, and I really am a big believer in laughing and
absolutely, man.
And happy hour is a great time.
Cutting loose is healthy,
Yeah, exactly. So
within reason.
And I had a middle school principal, and for anybody that's from Steamboat or knows about Steamboat, there was this guy. His name was Coach Harris, and Coach Harris, he was an old school guy, and I remember he busted me and my buddy for doing something, and he looked at us and he goes, "Boys, you're going to live with this forever. I'm going to tell you, everything in moderation and you'll be just right."
There you go,
and I'll never forget that. I mean, he's a legend in Steamboat because he started, the principal being a principal in like the 60s, and he just had this old school approach. It was pretty amazing. So everything in moderation is the key to life, according to him.
Cool. All right, so athletics, you had a solid upbringing with the family and everything. Athletics played a huge pivotal role in your life. What did after you got out of high school and stuff, what did kind of those years look like? I know when I was doing a little just research and studying, at some point you ended up graduating from the University of Colorado in Boulder, and then it said something about you brought Ralphie the Buffalo out on the field for all the home games.
So are you familiar with Ralphie the Buffalo?
I mean, I've seen him on TV, but I just doing the research, I found that out. So kind of just, if you don't mind, Taylor, just what did those years post high school look like? And then getting into college, and kind of maybe the Ralphie experience. How did that happen? And just kind of unpack some of your experiences in college and after high school.
Yeah, for me, college was like, it was going to be a necessity, but it was also like, I'm going to CU Boulder.
Right. Okay.
And I had no fallback. I just applied there. All of my grades, all of my SAT, ACT scores said you're a shoo-in, whatever. And so I applied there, and just like I expected, boom, I'm in.
Okay.
And it was like and a lot of my family are also CU buffs.
So alums then.
Alums,
so that was always a little bit of a help.
So that was a great deal, and I just love Boulder. So when I first went there as a freshman, I tried out for the hockey team, and it was one of those things. It was one of these instances where I was like, I still love hockey even to this day. But I had kind of gotten a little bit burnt out.
Yeah.
And so within the first week of being at school, I went out to try out. And it was one of these things that I hadn't skated for like 3 months. My skates were like, I don't even remember the last time they had been sharpened.
Right.
I mean, we had played in the Colorado State tournament, and I think that was the last time I'd played hockey. So I was like, oh crap, I'm going to go out here and look like a total idiot. And there was like 40, 50 guys on the ice, and it was like your standard skating, like you do the circles, you do some shooting, you do some passing. I was a defenseman, so, backward skating and just doing some basic hockey stuff.
Okay.
And at the end of the practice, this is, an hour-long practice, the coach blows us all together, and he's like, all right, I want to talk to blue 25 and white 15. And I look down and I'm wearing white 15. And I'm like, oh shit. Like, we didn't even pick up pucks basically.
Right.
And so everybody leaves, and me and this other guy, and I look at the other guy, and I'm like, well, he was a pretty good skater. And the coach looks at it, he goes, boys, you already made the team. And I was like, oh man. And I was like, well, if I already made the team, this is going to be a pretty crappy. Anyway, I looked at it, and I kind of had a little bit of a self-reflection. And I said, you know what? I'm in college. I really want to experience college, and I don't know if I love hockey in the way that I used to. And I'm kind of giving up on that dream a little bit. And so I actually ended up saying no to playing hockey.
Okay.
which in the short term was probably a bad decision. And
right.
The reason for that is that we were talking about going and partying, and now I'm out of the house, and no rules, and I think I went a little bit to the nth degree on that, and probably had a little bit too much fun, and it kind of screwed up not just my focus, is that I needed to have something to be focused on.
Right.
And so. Kind of a funny story is I got introduced through another a friend of mine at a college party, and he was like, "Dude, you got to meet this guy. He's a Ralphie runner." And I'm like, "Oh, cool. I've heard about Ralphie.
Right.
So it's running the buffalo on the field before the football games." And I was like, "All right, cool." So I go and introduce myself to this guy, and the guy looks at me. He goes, and I'm sorry for the listeners. This might be slightly inappropriate, but whatever. So he hands me a beer, and he's like, "You know how to shotgun a beer?" And I looked at him, and I'm an 18-year-old stud. I'm like, of course I do. So I look at him. I'm like, so he shotgunned this beer.
Yeah.
And he gives me another one and another one. And it was like one of those things. And so I'm like over the railing, it's just getting ugly. And he pats me on the back. He goes, "All right, bud, come to practice. Come to tryouts this Friday, and I'll introduce you to the coach."
Right.
And so sure as shit, I go and I introduce myself to the coach, and I go through this, the kind of the interview process, and then they had tryouts. So in the spring they have tryouts, and at this point I haven't really done a whole lot. I haven't been in the weight room. I haven't been running. I've been like. Fitness is like 7th on the list of importance right now. Right?
Beer drinking, right?
Right, exactly. I'm probably like the freshman 15 was very real.
Right.
And so I'm like, all right, I got to get in shape. So part of the tryout was you have to do a 100-yard or like 100-meter sprint.
Right.
You had to go run a 200-meter because that's about how far it is from point to point around the football field. And so I'm like, I got to figure this stuff out. And so I go to this empty lot. It's out west of, or I guess east of campus, and it's just it's a parking lot that's no cars are there. And I'm like, all right, I got to do some training. So I start, and there's like a track there. So I do a couple laps, and then I'm like, all right, well, I've got to do some sprints. Well, this is like 05, awesome. And I'm like, and so like, I don't know, like cell phones aren't quite what cell phones are today. So I don't really have a timing system. So I quite literally put a line in the gravel, pace off like what I think is like 40 meters or 100 meters, and I lined myself up to do some 40 sprints. And I'm like, boom, go, 1, 2, 3, 4, whoa, got through. I'm like, 4-2, man, that was pretty good. Mind you, I'm doing all the timing in my head.
Right.
So I'm like, so I call my friend Sarah. I call her. I'm like, Sarah, you wouldn't believe it. I was doing. She's like, how many people have you told that you were just doing this? And I was like, just you. She's like, I would suggest you not tell anybody else that you were out there timing in your own head your 40 sprints.
Right.
And so anyway, so I go to the legit tryout, and it was one of those things. It was sort of like a formality. It was like I just show up. Hey guys, I'm going to be on the team, and got onto the Ralphie running program, and I did that my sophomore through my 5th year at CU, and it was one of those things that I, all jokes aside, it probably not necessarily saved my life, but definitely saved my career, and
for sure,
and in many ways got me back into fitness, because at that time the Ralphie program had been a big part of the marketing department at CU, which just kind of sounds a little odd. But it makes sense.
Yeah.
That's a great way to promote people. But they were rolling it back into the athletic department.
Okay.
And so we got hooked up with a trainer, and we got hooked up with we were part of Dow Ward, which is where all the athletic facilities are. And it was amazing because then it got me more regimented. So it was like twice a week. It was 5 a.m. Workouts. 5 a.m. workouts. Work out for a couple hours, and then I just got this bug, and I was there every single day, and it was like throw on the weighted vest and go run Folsom Field steps. Like that was my church.
That's awesome.
That was where I got centered, and it was just an amazing experience. I mean, not only I got to go down to Athens, Georgia, and run at the Georgia Stadium down there, and just had some really cool life experiences, and frankly. I don't think a lot of kids have that experience.
Yeah.
And the other fun thing is that when all my buddies were partying on a Saturday for game day, I was taking the buffalo around to all these different spots on the hill, and they were thinking, so a lot of my nickname that I have is Bubba. And they were chanting Bubba and like just like loving me up, dude. It was so fun. Man. It was some of the best times. And
now, what is it like? I mean, because you've got, I mean, how many? What's the like seating capacity at
55,000?
So people. I mean, you got 55,000, give or take, or whatever. Like that's got to be like an adrenaline rush right there when you run out. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, so can you? What was that like? Was that like the first time you ran out with Ralphie? Was it just like? Just a trip, man, or
Dude,
what?
Dude, it was wild. So actually, what's so interesting, so my first year, so my like rookie year,
right?
You're kind of just the grunt. You're picking up the poop. You're doing all the literally crappy work, right? and you're the grunt. And so there was this interesting thing that happened, and it was at the tail end of the season, we had this group come in from MTVU.
Oh wow, okay.
And so I got introduced to this guy, and actually, interestingly enough, he happened to be from Steamboat, just a little bit older.
There you go, man.
And so it was like this immediate camaraderie between me and this guy. And what they were going to do is they were doing this thing. It was MTVU Game Day. And they were going to do this whole thing about the Ralphie running program. Unbeknownst to me, they'd worked with the coach, and that was going to be the first weekend that I ran the Buffalo.
Wow.
And so this whole thing was like, we go through practice, and they're like focusing a lot on me, and I'm like, well, this is kind of crazy. Like,
yeah, you just scoop the poop, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, okay. And all of a sudden, we're halfway through the first half, and the coach comes over to me with the cameras and all that, and he goes, "You're running second half." And I'm like, what? And so I have my whole first run and my first experience on, like, it was like broadcast on like MTV.
Wow, that's
which was
pretty
like
cool,
in
man.
like 06. This was
yeah, dude, MTV was legit,
like,
man. Yeah,
That's like they were still awesome.
Right,
and
right.
so it was just this amazing experience. But when I was grabbing the ropes, it was like shaking, man. In fact, as we talk about it, gives me shivers up my spine, because it was just one of those instances that, like, you're looking around, and the one thing that, for our listeners, the buffalo is not drugged in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
And she was about 1,000 to like 1,100 pounds, and she'll do whatever the heck she wants.
Right.
And you open the gates, and she's out the door, and it's like, hold on for dear life, and all you can do is your best to guide her.
Right.
And so that first experience especially was shocking.
That's a trip.
But what was crazy was when we were down in Georgia. That's 100,000. I think it was either 100 or 95,000 people, and you get 100,000 people barking, woo, woo, like the
dog,
right?
yeah.
And we're running the buffalo, and it was electric,
yeah,
dude. And we almost beat them it was like this crazy game. It was super fun, and they were still really
University of Georgia, right?
Yeah,
SEC,
yeah,
that's legit.
Dude,
stuff,
it was wild. It was so fun.
Yeah.
It was one of the more that was more memorable experience I've had in my life.
Is that game, or is there maybe like another a game that outside of the Georgia one? Is there maybe another one that's pretty memorable for one reason or another?
Yeah, there was two games that I really remember. It was when West Virginia was really good.
Okay.
I think, who was their White something, the quarterback.
I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't. But they were ranked in like the top 10.
Yeah.
And it was this. I believe it was a Thursday night game.
Okay.
And it was early in the season. And it was this raucous, like it was the blackout. It was a blackout game, so everybody, all the kids showed up in black, and the whole place, and it was just electric.
That's
and we
awesome.
were just like, and it was, it was one of those games, and we beat them, and it was great. And then another game was we beat University Oklahoma.
Oh wow!
And,
Sweet,
and I think they were ranked 4 at the time.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things that was like, this is going to be like, it was a monster game.
Right.
And I think we beat them with a field goal, and it was just this wild, because we're right on the field. And so you just get to feel the energy of the players. When they score a touchdown, they might like come over and just give us some dabs,
dude.
and it was sick.
That's
awesome,
man. That's a like you said earlier, that's a college experience that most people aren't going to have. You know what I mean? So, okay, so you're at the University of Colorado in Boulder, doing the Ralphie thing, kind of getting, it sounds like, back on track in regards to fitness and focus and discipline and everything. What did you go to study at the University of Colorado in Boulder, and then is that what you end up getting your degree in?
Yeah, fascinating. As we were talking about, the path forward is not always straight.
Right, exactly.
And so I had studied political science, and it was one of those things that as I kind of got halfway through my junior year, it was sort of, what did I just do? I had been kind of committed on this political science deal. And I had dreams of going to law school and doing that and having this, like, whatever. And I also was really good friends with a lot of kids that were from, like, Chicago and sort of, like, and so I was exposed to things that, like, careers that I didn't, like, in Steamboat, it's like, you don't just have that same level of exposure. Right. And so it was like, man, maybe I'll go to live in a big city and do this or that. And so I really had this kind of sort of, I want to say, coming to Jesus moment where I was like, man, what's going on here? Mm-hmm. And I may have chosen the wrong path. And then I realized that I can go and get my business degree on the side, or at least in this case, I got a business minor.
Right.
I started taking, it was my first finance class is what really made me realize this. And so I ended up graduating with a political science degree with a business minor.
Okay.
But I had studied abroad my second semester of my senior year. So it's basically a whole year after most people would. And so I always knew that I was going to graduate at least a semester behind. So I had been slated to graduate in the fall of 2008. Okay, when a lot of my friends had graduated in the spring of 2008. And I remember having this really interesting conversation in October of 2008. And for those that remember, that was basically the beginning, or the drawdown of the market.
Yep.
I mean, you saw massive pullbacks, 5% movements in the day, and it was just ugly. And I remember having a conversation with my mom, and she was like, Taylor, how many credits are you away from getting your business minor? And I was like, I'm like 16 or whatever it was. Or maybe it was, And she was like, you need to stay in school. You're going to stay in school. And so I was like, oh my gosh, like, wow, what a powerful thing to hear from your mom.
Yeah.
Like, somebody that's going to be footing the bill for that.
Yep.
That's the other thing, is my parents are just so gracious, and I'm overwhelmingly joyed because I don't have student loan debt.
Man.
And it was amazing. And, like,
it's
to
beautiful.
hear that from her was like, what? You want me to, okay, like, I'll take that. And I ended up just going full deep. And so, like, if my grade point average wasn't great for the last, 2.5, 3 years, it, like, completely turned around because of, like, the finance, the accounting, like, I just found, like, my home in the business world. So I ended up holding off graduating, and I ended up getting connected with, I had inherited some money from an uncle that had passed away.
Uh-huh.
And so my mom and dad were like, you know what, you should talk to a financial advisor, and why don't you just talk to our financial advisor? And so I sat down with him, and this was up in Steamboat. He worked for Edward Jones, and I was like, all right, this is cool. And he started asking me, like, well, what are you going to do when you graduate? And I was like, I don't know. And he's like, well, it's 2009, the spring of 2009. He's like, nobody's going to hire you, but we're hiring at Edward Jones. And I was like, oh, okay. And so that kind of started this conversation of, like, potentially that's the direction that I want to go.
Okay.
And it was just really powerful. And so from that, he was a great kind of launch pad for me to like, introduce me to, like, what a mutual fund was, what a stock was, like, and I knew that stuff because my mom was really helpful, and she helped me balance a checkbook when I was in fifth grade and things like that. So I had this, like, tertiary knowledge of this, but didn't really have, like, a deep dive on it. So that's when I started doing my own research on funds, on stocks, on companies, and this and that, and really understanding, like, what's the difference between a stock and a bond, like, things like that. And it was like, oh my gosh, and like, I think everything clicked. It was like when the gears all line up, and it's like, boom. This might be a real potential for me in my career. Cool.
Okay, so you end up graduating from the University of Colorado Boulder. Then did you step right into kind of like the financial Edward Jones thing, or what? Unpack a little bit of what post-college looked like kind of immediately, because we were in that time frame, because I graduated from college in 2010, so we're right around that area, and I remember my college that I went to, we had trustees that lost millions of dollars, and there was just a lot of upheaval in our country financially. So kind of post high school, you kind of have I'll call it maybe like an awakening of, like, hey, maybe this financial planning, this business type stuff, this is the direction I'm going to go in. Is that the direction you immediately went in post college, or was there something else in there, or what does that kind of look like, Taylor?
The great thing is Edward Jones was very flexible with me.
Right. Okay.
And so I started interviewing with them. And they were like, so you had to do these, like, little kind of tests. And so, like, I had to actually go in, like, my college town, Boulder, and go cold call people and just door knock them. And just say, hey, I'm Taylor Leary. I'm looking to go into the business of personal finance as a financial advisor. And I just had to get their name and number. That was, like, the deal. And I did get 25 of those. Okay. And so I did that. I did all the steps to get that taken care of. And all of my summer jobs had been into like construction and things like that were not finance.
Right.
And so it was like, all right, this is going to be kind of like the way forward. And when my last class, wrapping up my last class, the teacher was it was my marketing class. He asked our class, he goes, well, how many of you are graduating? And the 30 people in the class, whatever, some of them raised their hands. And then he's like, how many of you have jobs? And I was the only one to raise my hand out of all of the people that were graduating. And that like hit me pretty hard. And so I had already gotten an offer from Edward Jones. And so I basically started with them August 1st of 2009.
Okay.
2009. And, the first part of it is just training on, their systems, kind of their culture, and then also educating yourself about the test. So as a financial advisor, in order to like sell stocks and bonds and stuff like that, you have to have your Series 7 and a Series 66. And so I was studying for the Series 7 test and some of the other tests. And that was basically like, if you don't pass this test, you're not going to, you don't have a job. So I just went full on in there. And it was really interesting because this is where I got way back into mountain biking. It was my way to get back and get in tune with myself. Because I had continued, I was riding bikes around campus all the time, but I wasn't doing it I wasn't doing it for fitness.
Right.
I was doing it as a means to get from
transportation.
Point A to point B, exactly. Yeah. Then, so right as soon as I graduated, I started getting back into mountain biking, and it was a great way to break up my study time. And so I'd go study for a couple, 3 hours, mountain bike, study for a couple 3 hours, go do a run, so it was a great way to get back into the fitness realm of things.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so then I moved to Vail to work. They open, they have a territory.
Okay.
And so in Vail, that was going to be my territory, and it was like, holy crap! I'm born and raised in Steamboat, going to school in Boulder. Now I'm going to Vail.
Sounds pretty solid, man.
If I were to write this on Facebook or wherever, people would be jealous of that, of that future. And so I started door knocking in Vail and started, working my connections in the mountain towns, where, this is basically ground up. I mean, they give you kind of the tools and sort of the equation, but you've got to do all the work. And so you're door knocking, you're cold calling, you're doing this, you're doing that. You're calling your friends, your family, hey, you want to invest with me?
Right.
I've got this great idea, and it makes these incredibly awkward conversations. And it was hard. It was really, really, really freaking hard because at the same time I'm 24 years old, and I've got some buddies that moved up to Vail, but in a completely different capacity. They were working at Garfunkel's, or they were working as lifties or whatever. And so on a Tuesday night, I might get a call and be like, dude, we're going out. And it was like, no, I've got a client meeting tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
And so it really made me feel very isolated. And it was actually a really scary time for me because for the first time in my life, I was alone. I was living alone. I had my office in my little condo that I had.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any quote unquote friends. And so I ended up the next spring, I ended up picking up rugby.
Okay.
There was a local mountain rugby team, and it was like another moment of time where it was like, I'm going back to sports to center myself and really identify who I am at that deep level.
Now that's a theme that keeps popping up, is you're kind of going through, I'm not going to call them struggles, but you're just going through some of the downs of your life or whatever, and it seems like, when you got plugged in with Ralphie and kind of that team, and then, mountain biking, and then now it's rugby. It's like you're kind of having these times of life that are down or whatever, but then sports or some sort of physical activity, fitness kind of pops up, and it's kind of like your escape or an outlet. So, today for you, Taylor, just fitness in general, you spend time in the mountains, you do your mountain biking, you do running, just overall to kind of put a tie on the fitness thing for you, and then we're going to keep moving on here. What does fitness mean to you, and how does it help you in your overall productivity as a businessman, as a husband, and as a dad?
That's fantastic, because fitness is my core.
Right.
I mean, it's my center.
Yeah.
And I guess it's worth sharing. My mom was a massive marathoner.
Okay.
Ran Boston, New York. I mean, every
Gnarly.
major marathon, it seems like she ran in the United States. And then she kind of got over the road running and started running trails. and started doing ultra marathons and these big endurance races. And she did, like, I remember, like, the Mosquito Pass 50, which is up in Leadville, and, like, the entire race is over, like, 10,000 feet. It's this insane race, 50-mile race. And it's, like, I've always, you always wonder where you get certain things. And I think I got this, like, just this love of, like, endurance athletics through my mom. And we used to go, that was part of, like, vacations.
Cool.
We'd go vacation, and part of that was her running a marathon.
Love it, man.
You know, and so that, to me, has always been super centered in my life, is this idea of sports and this idea of fitness. And my dad and I were like, I mean, he was part of all of my hockey teams. He was the first one to really get me into mountain biking. And so I give them all the credit in the world of what fitness means to me.
Right.
For me, I'm not a real religious individual. I don't go to church. I don't do a lot of that stuff. But for me to go out, but I am spiritual. I really I care about that stuff deeply.
Absolutely.
Like there's a bigger, if I believe that I'm the greatest thing that exists in this universe, then I'm kind of full of shit. You know, that's really my true belief, is that there's something greater out there.
Right, absolutely.
And so for that, my way of, like, connecting back into, like, me, nature, is to get out on my bike.
Absolutely,
is to be running. And I think that makes me a better father and husband in many ways, and business person, is because it's a way for me to take this sometimes nervous or sometimes anxiety, or like all of these things that happen, these emotions that happen in us. That's my way to, like, get it out in the world and just really get back into who I am at the core, because I notice that there's sometimes that energy that's inside that just needs to pop.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like it sometimes might be just like the champagne bottle, and sometimes it's the volcano.
Absolutely, man.
And just getting out there and running, whether it's, you know, with the 20-pound vest on or just going on a leisurely ride, like it all varies, but it's a great way for me to center myself.
Awesome. Now, before we kicked off the podcast today, if I remember correctly, you said something about Leadville. Is that correct? What are you involved with that this year?
So I got connected with this gentleman who's ridden Leadville like 7 times. And so it's the Leadville 100 mountain bike race.
Okay, cool.
Not to be confused with the running race, which is next level.
Yeah,
but it's still, so it's kind of like, the Leadville 100 is kind of like the Boston Marathon of mountain bike races.
Cool, yeah.
I mean, people put this on their, like, life bucket list. And so I got hooked up with this guy, and I got on I put myself in the lottery, and fortunately got on the list.
Awesome.
And so this August I'm going to be riding in the Leadville 100.
Cool, man.
And it's one of those things that it's like I never thought I'd be doing this. But last summer I did the Steamboat Stinger, which is a mountain bike race and marathon up in Steamboat, and I don't know what really got me going, but I was like, you know what, I'm going to do the King Sting. And the King Sting was the 50-mile mountain bike race on Saturday, and then the trail marathon on Sunday.
Okay, wow.
And so the mountain bike race is 2 laps on this course, and the marathon is just 1 big lap.
Okay.
And I did it and crushed my times that I, like, my projected times. It was, like, out of control. I could have run 50 miles. It was like one of those moments where I was like, I think I found my calling.
Yeah, there you go.
So that was my first really, really big test in endurance athletics. That's not true. I did a race from Crested Butte to Aspen, a ski race.
Okay.
Called the Grand Traverse.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, and so that was a 40-mile ski race that starts at midnight, and it was a 13-hour race. So this is definitely my true passions in life.
Right. Yeah.
Is very real there.
I love it, man. Fitness, I know for me, it's just. I'm not going to say it's everything, but it's been such from childhood, it's been such a big part of my life, and it's just an outlet, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like if I didn't have, fitness, and, for me it's more like bodybuilding, lifting weights, but I've done all kinds of different type of fitness things, Spartan races, half marathon, all that stuff. It just provides something for me to look forward to. It provides that discipline, that focus, because I think, like you, like growing up, you have sports, and it's like there's always the next sports season, there's always the next sport to play, the next goal, the next whatever. And then, when I was done playing college football after my freshman year of college, it's like, dude, what's next?
Yeah.
Like, I don't have the next goal for this sport, or have the camaraderie. And I dove hard into like the bodybuilding and lifting, which again, it was kind of like didn't save my life, but it just provides that great value and that outlet for me. So I definitely can connect with you and relate, Taylor, in that area. Now, I want to touch on here because this is not only pertains to life, business, and athletics, but it's just an overall important, valuable thing to just have in our toolbox, and that's mindset. So with you being involved, Taylor, in the business world, in the financial world, and all of that, and dealing with a lot of different clients, and just all of that stuff, having the family life, but then also being involved in endurance sports, like what does mindset mean to you, and how does that mindset you have in these endurance events play into the business and play into the family, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about that, like, and where do you allow your mind to go, or where do you not allow your mind to go in the endurance, and then in kind of the day-to-day life of Taylor Leary?
Yeah, fantastic segue here. It's everything. I mean, your mindset, and it's something that I've really only I've known it on an outsider level,
like intellectually, right? Yeah,
but I've never really known it like in a deep way until about I would say 2 or 3 years ago. I started really diving into this like who am I? What path am I on? Where's my trajectory in life? And really, what am I going to be doing?
Yeah. And
I realized that having this growth mindset is massively important. And something hit me. This is relatively recent, but this idea between scarcity and abundance. And when you operate in a world of scarcity, that can really be limiting. It can limit your bigger beliefs, and because everything is looking at what you don't have or what could go wrong, or it's a very I think it puts the ceiling on things.
Right.
Whereas if you think about an abundance mindset, that can really kind of expand and explode things. And so this really pertains hugely in the investments world, as well as how it ties into the fitness world. If I go in things your body's going to keep moving forward. All right. If I'm 100 miles into a 100-mile race, or 95 miles, my body is going there's been tests that says you can be super super tired, and they'll still put an electrode on your muscle, and the muscle will fire.
Absolutely.
So only thing that's limiting you is your mentality, and from the context of evolution, that's a positive, because our mind needs to shut things down and let us know, but that can also limit us from our growth.
Absolutely.
And kind of breaking out of that comfort zone. And so I see that hugely in the context of my business. I see I have to be really focused on that bigger picture. And so going back to kind of the first part of the conversation is this macro patience, micro speed, being focused on kind of the day-to-day and getting the day-to-day activities, but also having patience on the bigger stuff. But with my clients, this is also that growth, the growth mindset with the abundance mindset versus that scarcity kind of limiting mindset. A lot of the times this happens with behavior and the psychology of investing, because markets go up and markets go down. And if you don't have sort of this idea that market's going to come back around, then that's operating in kind of a scarcity mindset, then what you're going to do is be much more emotionally charged when you're making these decisions. And so I always say that investors have a tendency to make the worst possible decision at the most inopportune times. And because that's really driven by money and ourselves, we're driven by emotions.
Right.
So money is such an emotionally charged topic. And so it's driven hugely by fear and greed. And if we don't get control of those things, then when the market's going up and you're looking around and you're not sticking to your principles or sticking to your investment strategy, then you're going to want to make decisions using greed, because you want to be a part of that. You want to buy Tesla at its all-time high only to have it fall down, or you want to be a part of the Uber or Lyft IPO or whatever. And it's just because it's kind of that herding mentality. You want to be a part of the crowd. On the flip side, you see, let's go back to 2009. So when I walked into the investment world, it was in August of 2009, and so I had a very interesting insight to that, because I didn't technically experience it directly. Now I saw my parents, I saw friends of friends and friends of parents, things like that had a huge impact on that. But it was like a wasteland when I walked into the industry. People had just lost half of their life savings. Because the bottom of the market was March of 2009. And I was listening to people that were selling their portfolio at exactly that moment, because they just couldn't take it any longer. And so this idea of having a growth mindset is that things are going to come back. And that one of the reasons, and I believe this hugely, is why do you hire a financial advisor? Well, it's somewhat to be a buffer between your money and you, because you're just going to react. Most people are going to react very emotionally to that.
Right.
And to kind of go back to kind of how this ties into like the fitness, if I'm in a race and I'm not sticking to my guns, like sticking to my strategy, then I might blow it up. And the analogy that I use, and I use this a lot with especially clients that are more fitness oriented, is let's just say you were running a marathon and your goal was to run an 8-minute mile. That'd be a pretty darn good and a respectable marathon time.
Mm-hmm.
But let's just say at mile 13, you're like, you know what, I feel really good. I'm going to go run a 6-minute mile. And you just rip off. And a 6-minute mile, as you know, that's a very fast mile. And I don't care if you have, if you're just coming off fresh. That's a fast mile.
Yep.
Then all of a sudden, the rest of the race, you may not finish. And so when it comes to that mentality and sticking to your course, sticking to the game plan is really, really important. And so having discipline, having that growth mindset, having that more focused approach is really, really important. I mean, it goes across the board.
Absolutely.
From finance to business to fitness. Like having that mindset is really, really powerful.
Perfect. Yeah, and that's something too, I think, for a long time intellectually I understood, like, mindset is important, but I think for so long in my life I so focused on the physical and how I looked and, performing physically. But dude, like, if you look at any high level, whether it's a military person like a Navy SEAL, business person, entrepreneur, coach, whatever it is, whatever category of life you want to throw out there, as people performing at a high level, it always goes back to the separator being the mindset, and where you can take your mind and where you can not allow your mind to go in those moments of maybe crisis or over time or what have you. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So cool. So we're gonna start wrapping things up here a little bit. I do want to touch on just a couple more things, Taylor. So you've talked about being the financial planner and all that, and that's your career. That's kind of where you're at right now. Just for myself and for some of the listeners out there, like, just generally and overall, like, what is a financial planner? And you've kind of touched on a little bit, but just a little bit more specifically, and how do you help your clients, or kind of what is your role in somebody's life in regards to a financial planner?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with that, being a financial planner to me is really understanding the trajectory and what you want to accomplish in your life. Okay, and our money, you hear about this all the time. Money doesn't buy happiness. But what it does do is it helps you. It can give you some sort of peace of mind.
Yeah. It
can give you the opportunity to experience things in your life that maybe you weren't otherwise allowed to do or have access to. And money is a huge part of who we are. And so lots of people out there have a really strange relationship with money. It's either good or bad, and most people have like a weird, bad relationship with money. And so having a financial planner can really help you put into place different strategies that will help you reach your ultimate goal. And also sometimes it's even helpful to understand your goals.
Right.
Many people don't even really know what they want. They just want to have money. They want to have more zeros in their bank account. That's all they like. That's what it really matters. Just add more zeros, and that's the end all be all. But understanding and unearthing some of the things that I like to talk about, and I operate with this principle of mindful wealth. And mindful wealth is a really powerful concept that I've come to really implement in my practice, and that is really finding the purpose and meaning behind your pursuit of wealth. Because if you're unhappy, if you're insecure, and you have $10 in your bank account, and you don't do anything about the core of who you are, if you have $10 million in your bank account, you're still going to be unhappy and insecure.
Right.
And so unearthing some of those things that happen inside of us is really highly important, because we know this for certain. Money's not going to solve any of that. In fact, it's going to perpetuate that, and it's actually going to be more focused and more magnified, and it's really quite scary, and we're seeing that all over the place.
Right.
And that, if you're gonna be crying in your tears in your Lamborghini, and that's a scary idea. So with financial, and I guess how I work with people is number one, I am a planner first. So let's discuss, let's unpack some of the things, a lot of what we talked about today. Well, let's unpack your story. Like, where were you? What is your relationship with money? Maybe your parents, you were poor, you were ultra wealthy, you lost money, you had this business fail, you went into bankruptcy, you had a really successful business, whatever. Everybody has this unique story. And it's all, I mean, it's like our thumbprint. It's that unique. Nobody's situation is the same.
Right.
So we start with planning first. And then we figure out the tools that we can use. So part of that is going to be investment strategies. And implementing an investment strategy, I'm very big on like a goal-based investment strategy, meaning what do you want this money to do for you, and then when do you need that money? So money that's need to be used in 1 to 3 years probably has a different risk profile than money that's going to be used in 15, 20, 30 years for retirement. And so those two things can have very different risk profiles to them, and they shouldn't be lumped into one lump bucket and just given one strategy and ride off to the sunset.
Right.
Because we're going to need to use and tap those different buckets. And then the other side of it is like, what just gets me fired up is the education piece. Is our financial literacy in the United States is absolutely terrible. You being an educator, you probably see this pretty often, and we learn all of these things, but we don't learn anything about finance. I meet people all the time that are well past when they should, in their 30s, 40s, 50s, that really don't know the difference between a stock and a bond, as an example.
I don't, dude. Like, honestly, I don't. I couldn't tell you.
And so that, and that's not to say like that's your fault. Like, that's a society thing, man.
Right.
We need to figure out, like, people need to understand how the banking system works. Like, people really should understand that, like, the Federal Reserve is like a huge, like, part of what we do in how our society operates. And I just don't really believe that there's a real deep knowledge for that. And so that is really one of the things that I want to do, and I've been doing, is educating people more on some of that deeper knowledge. And sometimes it's a little boring, but taking that effort and really understanding it can help you and ultimately give you the tools. As we talked about, power of one. Yep. We have to take responsibility of our own future, of our own destiny, and it starts in a huge way with the wealth and the money that you have or where you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I love it, dude. That's good stuff. And again, like, just educating people on stuff is it's everything, man. Because like, if you don't have somebody. If you don't have somebody pouring into your life and educating and teaching, and if you're not learning, then there's not going to be any growth. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing. Like, for school, and we touched on this a little bit, just with my passion of passing on the gift of fitness to the next generation and making sure to educate them in the right way. It's like we go to school, and I'm talking more in like public school setting or whatever, but we go to school and we have to memorize all these things. And dude, like, I look back on my middle school, high school, and college experience. It's like, dude, like, what did I learn?
Right.
Like, what did I learn that's really been very impactful, valuable, and powerful in my life as an adult?
Yeah.
I mean, after like learning, how to tie my shoes, multiplication, addition, subtraction, like, I'm like, dude, I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's like, just to have more education of things that are actually going to be very powerful and valuable in our lives day to day as adults, and to build our legacy is. It's everything, you know?
And to be fair, some of that stuff we need to figure out, like, what direction we want to go, whether that's like, engineering or science or what have you.
For sure, yeah.
I mean, there's definitely like a foundation that needs to be laid, but I think this idea, like, of stuff that we're going to be dealing with, like money, needs to be a much bigger emphasis at the younger level.
Absolutely, yep. So I just want to ask you quickly about risk, because you mentioned the word risk here just a few minutes ago, and I know for my experience in life is like, if I want growth in any area of my life, I have to take risks. I have to be willing to take risks. I have to step outside of the comfort zone and into the uncomfortable. Are risks a huge part of the financial world if you want to gain more wealth, gain more money, take that business, what have you, to the next level?
100%.
Okay.
There is absolutely zero doubt about that. And I've seen people in the past that take unneeded risks, and then also people that should be taking more risks.
Right.
And have been too conservative in their decision making, and that's limited their ability to really grow what they want to have. And it's part of that scarcity mindset. That's hugely a part of that. So risk is paramount to the investment strategies and ultimately what you want to achieve. Because if you want, again, we have to do it with a calculated approach.
Right.
Okay? Just taking risks for the sake of taking risks, like, doing a cliff jump, or doing, just being wild out there in nature, like, that's like sometimes an uncalculated risk. Like, if you're sending it off a jump in Breckenridge and you don't even know what the landing looks like, and maybe you're not a very good skier, like, that could be like,
it's just stupid, right?
Just silly,
it's just
right?
stupid,
right?
yeah.
But if and you go watch the X Games, all those guys are hucking themselves, and gals are hucking themselves, and it's all a very calculated risk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's that's my approach, is like, if we're going to be approaching, we have to be very aware of risk, and then do it with your eyes wide open. We've used that term a couple times here.
Yep.
But do it in a calculated way that says, I know, and this is what I expect to happen in this type of investment. It's going to go up, it's going to go down. There's, if you're an early investor in, a company, that company might not even make it, right? We see this pretty regularly, but, in the broader context of, like, the investors that I work with, there's growth and there's conservative approaches. And so having that approach and understanding each of those sleeves is really important, because I like to go back to be able to answer the question of why. So if we have a bad market environment and their portfolio is not performing as they would expect, we can answer the question why. Conversely, if the market's going up like crazy and their portfolio is not up as much, we can answer that question why. And so understanding all of those metrics is really, really important to the bigger picture.
Cool. Okay, so two more things. I want to give you the opportunity, Taylor, just to talk about your wife and your daughter, and just what they mean to you as an adult, as a man, as a business person. Just what is that for you, your family?
Yeah, we were just talking about the why. And I think, we hear this, Simon Sinek was big on this and wrote a book about what start with why. And they are absolutely my why in this world. My wife, it's, as we're talking here, it's Mother's Day.
Yeah,
and, I wrote, hey, I'm going to be doing this podcast, and she was so cool with it. We did some stuff yesterday, and then we're going to go do a little hike afterward. And they're everything to me. And I've realized that as I get older, and I think it's maturity, I'm 33 years old, and, things that used to be really, really important to me are less important.
Right.
Because, when we get home from our dinner last night, my daughter just, like, sprints over to me and, like, spread everybody apart. I'm giving Daddy a hug. And it was like, it's like that sort of stuff just lights me up. Mm-hmm. She's really big. She's starting to learn how to do her kick bike, and, she has this other little tricycle thing. And just to see her smile and just to see her run around is absolutely everything to me, and it's really powerful to drive my business, because when I'm sitting here, we talk about in the financial world being a fiduciary, and I sit across from my clients a lot and say, like, what, like, if I don't operate in the best interest of them, then I'm ultimately harming my wife and my family and my daughter, because that is going to be a business relationship that I could hurt, and that could hurt not only the money that I can make, but also it could put me in a really bad spot,
right?
And really derail my career.
Right. Yeah, that's a great perspective. So the last question to wrap up the podcast today, Taylor, is what sets your soul on fire?
What sets my soul on fire, man? I always notice that when I start creating, is when things really set me off, and in a positive way. I find myself getting on the edge of my seat, and so this, like, comes with having fun with my clients. Okay, so if I have a really engaging client, which is really what I want to work with, is like active and engaged individuals,
right?
And they're like, okay, this is, I was working with an individual a couple weeks ago who was part of a recent IPO, and just to see what his opportunities are in the future is like, blows my mind.
Right.
And it was like, we can create some amazing things for him. And so we were just going back and forth, and I could just sense the synergy between us. It was really powerful. And then on top of that, right now I'm creating a little project that I'm creating is going to be diving deeper into this mindful wealth concept.
Beautiful, man.
So I'm going to be talking about, so the two pillars of mindful wealth are financial vitality, so like that, the wellness, the health of our finances, and then also meaningful prosperity. So why, like, what's the why behind that? And so I'm creating this whole, like, program around that. and I'm just super stoked to introduce it to the world and roll that out. So I think what it comes down to, it boils down to creation, creating value, creating stuff, creating energy in the world.
Mm-hmm. Cool, man. Cool. So Taylor, that wraps up the podcast. Again, I just want to thank you just sincerely for taking time out of your day. Again, we've mentioned a couple times it's Mother's Day and got the family thing going on, but you took time out to meet up with me, to share your story, to get some positive information, valuable information out into the world to my listeners. So thank you very much, man, for your time. And I just want to give you, if anybody is listening to this, connecting with you, whatever, if they want to reach out, get a hold of you, find out more about what you offer through your job and things of that nature, where can people reach out to you and touch base with you?
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me on.
For sure,
This was really fun. I really appreciate the questions. So you can find me on Instagram at Denver's Wealth Advisor. I can also be found on Facebook under the same handle, Denver's Wealth Advisor. Also, Presidential WM is the firm website. And then also we're going to be rolling out some more stuff on our YouTube channel, so you can just search Taylor Leary there. TaylorLeary is the first name, last name. So thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely, Taylor. So listeners, thank you again so much for hanging out with Taylor and myself for the 127 Fit podcast. If you guys want to reach out to me, you can do that through Instagram, and that's at 127 Fitness. Facebook is at Quentin Vars. And if you guys could do me a huge favor, please like, subscribe, share, and then most importantly, leave a review for the podcast. That just helps out in the podcast world to get more ears and things of that nature. If you think you would be a great guest, or if you have a friend or something of that nature you think would be a great guest for the 127 Fit podcast, just shoot me an email, 127fit@gmail.com. And then if you guys are getting some awesome value, which I know you are, out of the podcast, if you just want to maybe start sharing that on your Instagram stories and things of that nature, and then just start using the hashtag be someone to follow, that would be kind of cool just to get a little movement going with that. So per the usual, I will leave you with Proverbs 24:10, which states, if you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. This time until next time, I will catch you guys later.